We only have a few minutes left with Renee here, so let's get to some questions around her. First off, there's a lot that you did cover, but some of the main points here are, if malpractice insurance will cover or not once formal recommendations are in place against conducting business.
That is outside of my wheelhouse. I think you'll definitely want to check with your malpractice carrier, because every plan is individual, and your plan administrator will be able to answer that much better than I can.
And I answered that earlier from Doctor's Company, that you were covered under that. They don't determine, they cover you as a physician, and you can decide what you want to do.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think some of these will be repeats, but it's good to have the discussion again.
Can I also just point, before you ask another question, I have to point out that, Renee and Ryan, they're not getting compensated for doing this. They're doing this as a service to the community, and I just kudos to them and thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. The second question is can you furlough some of your employees and not others?
Yes, you can, and I had this conversation earlier today with another client. What you want to be cognizant of is making sure that you're not doing that on a discriminatory basis. So if you're going to furlough a class of employees or a team of employees, it can be based on their job, it can be based on their position, it can be based on you needing to reduce staff, but be careful that you're not cherry picking, kind of as I said before, who you're going to furlough based on any protected class that employee might be in. And when I say protected class, I'm referring to that employee's age or their gender or their ethnicity, their race. And it may seem very obvious that you wouldn't do that, but you'd be surprised that there are employers that have wanted to furlough certain employees on the basis of that they're over 60. And so in that employer's mind, that person may be more susceptible to the virus, so they want to furlough that person. Whenever you're taking a protected status into account, that could be a claim for discrimination on that employee's side. So you want to be very careful how you are furloughing employees.
Great, thank you very much. The next two are in regards to taxes for surgeon owners. If I reduce the pay to employees, will I still be eligible for tax benefit?
That is a great question for your CPA. I know just enough about taxes to be very dangerous. So I would say talk to your accountant on that. Every employer is going to have different tax liability status and considerations to take into account. So I don't want to give an overall answer on that, because it really would be individualized to that business.
And Renee, this is Ryan. If I can, to clarify, right now the primary tax benefits that are proposed are for those employers who are put in the position to pay one of the two primary Family First benefits that are newly proposed, newly passed, and they're basically receiving a tax break for providing either of those 80 hours of sick leave or the FMLA benefit. Those are the main tax benefits that are different from what we deal with currently as employers?
Yes, if you're referring to just the tax benefit for the act, the way that these employees are getting the paid leave or the paid sick leave or the paid family leave is through their employer. How that's going to actually shake out when it comes to processes is a question for hopefully later in the week when they have these forms and processes in place. But from a general perspective, the employer would pay for this leave and get that money back in the form of a tax credit, and it would be taken out through the FICA taxes. So how that is actually happening, I've talked to a few CPAs and financial planners who say it should be a rolling situation where you're not waiting till the end of the year to get that tax benefit back, or that tax credit back. But how often that's going to happen, I don't know yet. So I think those are some of the nuances that we're still dealing with that hopefully the IRS will address later this week.
Okay. A couple more follow-ups on that, which might be more in your wheelhouse. It turns out that a business with less than 50 employees became tax exempt from the Family First Act. Will they still be eligible for the tax benefit if continued payroll complied with sick leave and FMLA? Theoretically, since I know there's not really an answer yet because nothing's been passed.
They're asking if they would have to comply with FMLA outside of the Families First Act. I'm not sure.
They're asking if they become exempt from Family First, but they're still complying with sick leave and FMLA, will they still be eligible for the tax benefit?
Okay.
So, the table that as well, but please, your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's hard to address at this point because we don't know. But if they are exempt under the Families First Act, most likely you would not be able to take advantage of that particular tax benefit because you're not actually complying with the act. You are not providing paid leave under that act. Whether there may be other tax benefits that come back for an employer who's providing what we would call traditional FMLA or traditional paid sick leave, that might be on a state-by-state basis. If you have paid sick leave within your state, there may be tax benefits or tax advantages through that. And perhaps the government would address that separately and provide tax benefits. But at this point, if you're not providing family or sick leave under that Families First Act, you would not be able to get the tax benefit.
Okay.
Lane, let me jump in with something, and that is, we realize that different parts of the country have different issues, different communities, different needs. But you have to think you're a plastic surgeon. Before that, you're a surgeon. Before that, you're a physician. And we have to think about that overall as being a physician. There was an article that came out yesterday from the Washington Post from other physicians who essentially said, if you're doing a breast augmentation, you're doing elective cosmetic procedures today with what's going on, they find it morally repugnant. So think about that and think about how we're being perceived in the public, because at some point we want to be busy again. We want to have a positive image.
One other comment, Robert, about business is, be proactive in dealing with vendors and lenders versus defaulting on stuff. It's certainly easier to say to them ahead of time, hey, we're having difficulties here. I mean, Paco Canales mentioned that about American Express in the call last week, where he was able to get an extension on payment dates. But again, be proactive so that you're not in default. All this stuff, again, we're trying to preserve your credit rating.
And if I could just reinforce that, I think I speak for all vendors that we're here to work with you and we're in this with you guys. So regardless of what vendor or what bill you're talking about, reach out to the representative and start that communication. And all of our companies are working quickly to be able to find answers and help you guys.
Hey, Blaine, one of the things that we haven't talked about in terms of talking to vendors is the concept of going to your landlord and seeing if they would forgive you a month or two of your lease if you're leasing your space.
Or push it forward.
What? Pardon me?
Or push it forward.
Correct. Exactly right. Push it forward so you have time to keep the doors open or keep your staff employed in some way or form. And then, you're going to pay it eventually, but it's just one more thing to look into.
I just saw a comment, and I think it's a very valid one, that somebody was holding off on making decisions on their staff until there's some clarification from what's coming from the federal government of what's going through Congress now. I think a lot of us are in that situation to be able to make intelligent decisions, concerned about our staff, but also how to survive economically for the practice. And I think we'll have more clarity, hopefully in the next couple of days with that. And that's one of the reasons we want to revisit and have another webinar.
In the interim, you get creative and you keep your employees till you have that down, unless they choose to stay home and take care of their families. But that's that conversation you need to have with each and every one of your employees before we understand the bigger ramification of what's out there.
Yeah.
I do have to jump off in just a minute, but I wanted to say, to Mary's point, I think that's such a great policy. And I've had this conversation with multiple clients this week, just reminding them that ultimately your employees are looking for communication and guidance,
Right.
just like your patients. And so if they feel that the wheels are falling off, so to speak, they're gonna be more panicked, right? They're gonna be frantic. And they're
reach for their life jacket and their parachute, you know?
Yeah, right. So, and we had this discussion within my own firm. A lot of the employees were looking for guidance just to be certain of what was happening. And so I think it's really important, as Mary said, that you have these individual discussions to the extent that you can. And if it can't be in person, then, calling your employees or sending them an email to reassure them that you are going to provide guidance and you are doing the best you can, and just letting them know that you are there to communicate with them. On that, I'm so sorry I have to jump off. I have 2 children that are going to bed and a nanny who's
Thank
sleeping,
you.
so
Thanks,
I'm
Renee.
happy to
Invaluable.
answer more questions if you do another webinar.
Renee, you're not finished with us. We're coming back to you for another webinar.
All right.
Oh, wait, there's more.
Take care, everyone.
And
Signing off.
just add on that same point, we talked about it on the first webinar, but engagement with your employees is super important, as she said, and not just to make sure they have stuff in the office to do, because that may not be possible, but communication with them. And then there's lots of resources here with the society, with some of these practice management consulting groups that we've had on. I'm sure Mary has plenty for them to do. Sienna also has lots of practice management webinars on archive, and also live ones for customers. So you can give good hours for improvement and get your staff running sharper than they ever were before, so that when we come out of this as a group, you guys are ready to go and grow.
Blaine, I think it was mentioned earlier.
That's right. That's right.
I think
But also it's
developing.
allowing them, sorry, Mike, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It's just allowing them to see what needs to be done that doesn't get done in the office day to day. And it's interesting because we have not purged in a very long time, all right? Because life is just too fast and frantic. But that became one person's, I'm going to do this. I'm going to sit down and do this. I'm going to take the charts home, because we have charts at this point in time, and I'm going to do it at home. And I thought, wow, thank you very much. We need that. So that person came up with it themselves.
I was going to say that WhatsApp, which was mentioned earlier, is a really powerful app. It's used around the world a lot more than we use it in the States here, but you can develop a group with your employees to keep in touch with them, because
We did that today.
Yeah.
And we've done that also.
I'll echo the fact that they are waiting. They're watching you as you come out of your meeting with your partners or by yourself to, what's going to change. And so keep in touch. And there's a question that just came up, Mark, that talks about a non-HIPAA compliant virtual release consult form. Or
I think you could have something like that. That would be straightforward. I mean, that's a possibility. Although the platform that Ryan mentioned, it's free, deserves to be looked at also.
Right.
I mean, there are many different ways to get creative here that are relatively low-hanging fruit that you don't have to spend a bunch of money on or sign up for forever. That sort of stuff. But
yeah, I would echo what Ryan said earlier about taking too much of a liberal tack with the changes in HIPAA law. Those really are for treatment of COVID patients, and I don't think that it means that you can start having patients send naked pictures across email and expect to be covered by that. So I'd be cautious.
I want to go back and point out, being a cheerleader for the Aesthetic Society, because you look at the aesthetic space and who has come up with these webinars, who has really reached out to educate and help everybody. It's the Aesthetic Society. You haven't seen that from the facial plastics. You haven't seen that from the derm surgeons. You haven't seen that from the oculoplastic, and you certainly haven't seen that from the, quote, cosmetic surgeons.
Well, we're big on education. This is an offspring of our teaching course that we've done for the last 25 years, and we really hope that it's been helpful for everyone tonight to be part of this. And we certainly are planning the next one to be ran pretty soon, and certainly look for your suggestions in the group chat with regards to topics you'd like to hear.
Blaine, do you have any critical questions that people want answered before we sign off?
I think most of the ones that have been answered, I don't know that we have answers yet. So things like, what happens to your ventilator after they take it, to get it back. So maybe we'll table things like that.
Well,
so just for everyone on still,
first is, we are protected under the Constitution from unreasonable searches and seizures here. So, again, there is some protection with regards to.
But even if you donate it to the cause,
let's donate it. That's fine. But
what's the plan to get it back, and how long are we going to be out of doing surgery? Is it till PBEs are back? Because those are on shortage, so that'll probably be a problem, possibly longer than the ventilators. We'll see. So time will tell.
I would expect severe equipment and supply shortages as we come out of this thing. So be prepared.
One of the questions that we didn't bring up, but I know has come to me from a few people who called or spoke with me, and that's what about staged breast reconstruction procedures after the initial one? Is that considered urgent? I think that's an individual decision. I think that many have suggested delaying that because of the risks to the patients, because that's not an absolutely urgent one. I know that I spoke with Charlie Thorne today, and he said, I think in New York, they have delayed cancer procedures unless they were absolutely critical necessary, but they've delayed things like mastectomies and others. So you have to think about if it's a procedure that is necessary that they're going to do. I think looking at it from the immediate breast reconstruction at that time is a little bit different from looking at the subsequent stages, but I don't think anybody can come up with a hard and fast rule that should tell you. I think you have to evaluate that yourself.
To prevent the spread of metastases, a primary recon with and a mastectomy is permissible.
Dr. Gordon Lee also just said that Lind Jeffers with ASPS has a task force to provide some guidelines for membership for the reconstructive piece too, which is that's still evolving.
I think a lot of these things are evolving.
Exactly, and so with that, I have a whole list for us to work on for the next webinar. I think we're planning either this week or early next week. So, thank you guys for letting us.
Charlie Thorne said in New York, no breast recon is allowed, period. All cancer surgery has been delayed.
But again, we may see that coming everywhere, but the situation New York has with the number of cases, the shortage of beds, shortage of personnel, may be a little bit different from what we see in other places. But I think it's something that everybody needs to think about and consider. I hope for everybody who's logged on to this, I hope it was worth their while. I hope they feel it was productive. I know that each of us who've been part of this faculty have learned a tremendous amount.
There have been a lot of very nice comments on the thread. Hopefully that's something that people, and some good information as well, not just comments about the discussion, but some good advice given as well.
And what we talked about, although it's primarily been focused on in the States, this is a global situation. Yeah. All of our colleagues internationally are faced with most of the same situations. They've been supportive, and I know that they've been cooperative with the Aesthetic Society and ISAPS of trying to get out the right message to practitioners and to the public.
Yeah, well, I think it's been a wonderful 2 hours that we've all spent together. Robert, if you're all right, let's go ahead and wrap it up and start thinking about the next webinar to be determined. But Blaine, thank you so much for your help and for the support of Sientra, Ted, Mr. Nugent, and everybody else. I think it's been a wonderful opportunity to communicate with our members. So,
Blaine, we couldn't have done this without you. Thank you so much.
thank you.
Okay, guys, with that.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Stay
Good night.
safe.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
No, but I thought, that, hold on.
Get out.
Okay.
Yeah,
Robert,
Blaine, thank you.
I'm stopping the share. Thank you.